It's wonderful to be standing up here finally. I was asked to talk in May 2019, so we have 3 years to think about this. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, just wave. A bit about me. I grew up in Te Awa Kairangi, Lower Hutt. I've lived most of my adult life in London. I work part-time as the office manager for Dementia Wellington, and I'm working on a national data project with Dementia New Zealand. I also review Mate Wariwari books, and I have a blog called On the Same Page, which is on the New Zealand Dementia Foundation website. My father, Don, was diagnosed with dementia in 2011 and died in 2019. This is Dad and me in 2017 at Bob Scott Retirement Village. He just moved into the dementia care unit there, which I'll refer to as the unit from our family is Te Tangata Tiriti. Dad was proudly half Scottish. His mother emigrated to Aotearoa from Glasgow, and on my mother's side, my great-great-grandfather was a coach painter in Gloucestershire. In 2014, my partner Mia and I started visiting annually from London. Returning after the 2018 visit was very hard because I didn't know if I would see my dad again. Mia and I were able to take a year's leave in 2019, and I was able to spend a lot of time with Dad from January until July. In 2020, during the London lockdown, I completed my book, Dad, You've Got Dementia, Conversations with My Father, which is due from the Cuba Press in mid-2023. My dad said some insightful things about his condition, such as, I need to tidy my mind. I'm not where other people's memories are. One day he memorably said, I feel confused. From 2015, I started writing down some of our conversations, and then in 2019, I wrote short pieces about being with Dad in the unit when he had less language, and later I'll read some extracts. This is what I'm calling the shared care triangle. Acknowledgement to Emma Frommings for this. The two strong sides of the triangle show the focus that health professionals and relatives have on the person living with mate wariwari. This is natural, that makes sense. But I think the weakest side of the triangle is the working relationship between relatives and health professionals. I'm proposing that as health professionals and whānau combine their respective skills and knowledge, seeing themselves more and more as care allies, then everyone benefits. The resident, the whānau of the resident, and the health professionals and staff. I'm going to talk about what happened in 2019 in the unit and how I saw the relationship between whānau and staff being strengthened. I spent a lot of time in the unit, and I had more time than most visitors. I saw that a lot of visitors were under pressure. They were juggling work, looking after children and or grandchildren, and they were having a family member in the unit. I saw some whānau leaving the unit crying or looking dazed, often looking stressed. I saw some grandchildren trying to connect their grandmother who just kept walking away from them while they followed after her. One day I saw a visiting relative give some staff a really hard time. The staff looked demoralised. I was aware that they needed to keep going and look after the other residents, including my dad. Saying that, overall, the unit was a peaceful place, but disturbances could be due to residents and relatives' behaviour. Did I say I'm the kind of person who's curious? Yes. I like to problem solve, so I asked some staff and a manager this question. Who are generally harder to deal with in a special care unit? The residents or the relatives, visitors? The staff were very quick to answer. I can guess you know what they said. The manager was more diplomatic. She smiled and she said to me, "Kristen, I can't really tell you the answer to that question," which was an answer. But relatives and staff did work together to strengthen care in the unit, and I'm going to talk specifically about 3 examples of shared care that I benefited from and I was involved in. And these are a new relatives whānau checklist, courses or education, and music. So I'll start with checklists. There were a small group of us in the unit and we met regularly to support each other. We called the group Time to Talk. It was really important to be listened to and to listen to each other. Tea and cake were mandatory at these meetings. At Time to Talk, we designed a checklist for relatives who were new to visiting to help them quickly get to know how the unit worked. The idea was that the new relative of a resident would work their way through the checklist so that they knew, for instance, the after-hours entry code, how to make a podiatry appointment, when happy hour was. Here's an example of how a checklist for a new relative could have been useful. A daughter's mum had moved into the unit on Monday. The daughter said it would be fine for some friends to visit her mum on Wednesday morning. On Wednesday morning, her mum was taken out in the minivan for the weekly outing. The visitors arrived and the staff had to explain to them that the person they'd come to visit was out. The new resident missed out on a visit from some people that knew her well. The daughter was frustrated. If she'd known, she could have suggested another day. So this was a lose-lose-lose situation. A new relative or whānau checklist would strengthen the relationship between relatives and staff, as relatives would have more information and need to ask fewer questions of the staff. So I think it'll be a win, a win, a win. And by the way, I've got some checklists on the table there, so you're very welcome to take some, or on your evaluation form, I can email you one, and then if you want to adapt it, or have a look at it and see how it could be useful in your setting, you're very welcome. Learning education. In April, I do have a slide for this one. I attended a late-stage dementia course run by Dementia Wellington at Bob Scott's. Bob Scott provided the meeting room. It was very handy for us who had relatives in the unit because we went to the course in the morning and we just popped upstairs and we could visit our person. This is an example of strengthening the shared care triangle. It was at that course that I first heard about shared care and that I could participate with staff because of how much longer I'd known Dad. This slide shows how long our family had known Dad compared to the carers in the unit. Dad lived till he was 84. So Mum, for instance, knew him for 60 of those years, and his 3 daughters, we knew him for over 50 of those years. The little blocks on the right represent the time that one of the carers spent the most with him, which was 2.5 years. So you can see how we had this knowledge to support him and share the care. Here's some examples. Throughout his life, Dad always had a hanky with him. So I noticed at the unit, he often reached into his pocket to take out a hanky and there wasn't one. So I asked his carer, could you please put a hanky in Dad's pocket? It's what he's used to. I explained why. The next day, she made a point of letting me know that she'd done that. So I said thanks so much and she got pleased. So that was a win for me, win for her, win for Dad. Okay, this is Dad and Mum on their wedding day. I love Dad's hairstyle here. Where have these hairstyles gone, people? I would love to see these come back in fashion. All his life, Dad brushed his hair back. So when one visit his hair was to the side, it looked really strange. He didn't look like Dad. So I let the carer know how he usually had his hair. Dad looked like Dad again, hopefully felt more like himself, and the carer knew that they were getting his hair right. So that's a win, win, win. This extract from my book, Dad, You've Got Dementia, just demonstrates what can happen when a relative doesn't have an understanding of dementia. What's my name? I'm sitting with Dad and other residents in the communal lounge when I hear a voice that carries across the room. What's my name? A woman visitor is standing, asking this question repeatedly, looking down at her mother, who is seated. Her mother is an elegant woman who uses a walker to get about the unit. She cannot talk anymore. When her mother doesn't reply, the daughter says, "See, she doesn't know my name anymore. What's the point of visiting?" I think 3 things. 1, why would you ask your mother your own name when you know it yourself? 2, why would you ask someone who has dementia and who can't talk a question that may be difficult for them to answer? 3, who are you visiting for? This was a lose-lose-lose situation. In my view, this was a grieving daughter, frustrated at her mother for not being the woman she once was. Learning about mate warewaru, learning about visiting and ways to connect could have helped her. Music. On Anzac Day, the first concert was held in the unit. This is Greg on the horn, me, piano, and Nelson who sings. Afterwards, I thought, I'm sure there are whānau and others who'd like to perform for the residents. I talked with the activities coordinator, asked if we could try a monthly concert. The idea was that the concert would be run by relatives for their family members in the unit, and the performers would all be people we knew. So between us and the Time to Talk group, we came up with at least 7 acts, and also people would turn up on the day to perform. There were 7 concerts after Anzac Day on the first Saturday of the month in the afternoon, and here's my sister and me singing, accompanied by my mum on the piano. One of the residents' husbands recited limericks, and I can still remember her going, "Look, look," as he was standing in front of us. A resident from the village played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and there was a profound silence while she played and afterwards. My friend Yuri led chair Zumba sessions and brought her therapy dog. The concerts were a great success. This is the big bow at the end of the Christmas concert, and after the bow, we gave the staff a gift basket to say thank you for all they did for our family members. And I'm just going to go off script here. To the health professionals here, thank you for all you do for our family members on a day-to-day basis. So the residents were entertained. Some saw their whānau performing. Some residents would dance and sing along, or in one case put their fingers in the air and say, "This is out of tune," and it was, and we were all thinking that, but it was sort of part of the entertainment. And then the staff, they had an hour when the residents were mostly in one place. They also supported us, they publicised the concerts, they helped set up the room, they performed, so that was strengthening the shared care triangle. It was regularly announced at the concerts that people could go into the unit to play the piano. So I would go in when I could, I'd work my way through the Reader's Digest songbook. I'll just tell you, T for 2 is a dead cert. If you want the people involved, just play T for 2. So, live music is win, win, win. Why don't we have signs like this? Because there are pianos in many aged care facilities. It could be a welcoming sign. It would make it easy for people to play if they felt like it. As I was preparing this talk, I became aware of this. I'll just hold it up. It's the Code of Expectations for Health Entities' Engagement with Consumers and whānau. Very long title. I don't know why it has to be that long, but it's very long, but it's very short, which is refreshing. Okay, so there are copies of this on the table, but I found something in here about shared care, and I just want to read it to you. I'll slow. Engagement expectation 1.4 is to share leadership, and it's got these two important phrases. Knowledge and expertise drawn from lived experience are valued equally alongside clinical and other knowledge. And consumers, whānau, and communities are experts by experience, often holding solutions to make improvements to the health system. So implementing the Code of Expectations will strengthen the shared care triangle. So moving it from this to this. To summarise, innovation is needed to meet the challenge of the expected growth in the numbers of people living with mate wariwari. I think formally adopting a shared care culture in residential settings, strengthening the partnership between healthcare professionals and whānau will be one of the ways to meet this challenge. Whānau relatives have a lot to offer because of how well we know our family members, plus we bring other gifts from our working lives, hobbies and interests. Checklists and education and live music are just some of the ways of strengthening the shared care triangle, and I'd be interested to know what thoughts and ideas you have for shared care in a residential setting. The arrows in the shared care triangle go in both directions, so I'm going to finish with this extract from my book, Dad, You've Got Dementia, which shows this reciprocity. I was so delighted to hear, I think 2 speakers have used reciprocity. I had that word as well. I thought, well, that's a bit of a funny word, but we had 2 people. So I'll just read this out. Another visit, and Dad's sitting in the corner of the lounge. It's a hot summer's day. I thought we might walk, but he is settled and makes it clear, without words, that he isn't moving. So I sit with him. A resident comes and sits opposite us. She is wearing sunglasses and a woolen cardigan over a long-sleeved shirt. She's in direct sunlight. As she gets hotter, she fans her face with the bottom of her cardigan, sighing and remarking on the heat, putting her sunglasses on the top of her head and then over her eyes, repeating these gestures for at least 10 minutes. Dad turns to me, tilts his head, and raises his eyebrows. I raise mine back. When it's time for lunch, Dad doesn't want to go to the dining area. His lunch is brought to him on a trolley table, tomato soup and white buttered bread. I take out my whole meal, bread, peanut butter sandwich, and put it down next to his lunch. He picks up my sandwich and starts eating it. Enthusiastically, I pick up his bread and eat it. After lunch and a time of sitting quietly together, I turn and put my arms around him and tell him how much I love him. Definitely, he replies. Kia ora. Thank you.